Okay, so welcome back, Carolyn, and it's good to see and speak with you again for another conversation in our series. I hope you're well.
I am well, and I'm delighted to be here. I get to spend one morning a week with you, which is a very, very good part of my life.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad to hear it's not too painful. Um, so I know again, I asked you just be prior we started to record anything on your mind you wanted to speak about, because I know our conversations are very spontaneous. We don't prepare anything or plan anything. We just say what kind of theme was on your mind. And you told me that you were thinking about the what were they called, the law of attraction, or the theme of attraction. And I thought that's very timely because many people have spoken about this idea of attraction, how it works, and especially in our current climate where we see so much polarization, so much division and compartmentalization. It's like the atoms are going apart rather than coming together. So I'd like to hear what you're thinking on this subject. So over to you.
Well, thank you. I think about it all the time, actually, and have even written books about it. But right now, I happen to be loving somebody, so it's very close to the skin, and noticing how that feeling of attraction changes everything. It's like a deepening of sensitivity, and things have meaning that don't normally. I walk right past it. So I don't know. In a way, it it matches the happy feeling, the feeling of looking forward to whatever comes next. That sense of enlarged perception, that sense of appreciation. You lean down to pet a dog, and it's an extraordinary experience. That sort of thing. So, I'd wonder, of course, is it possible to live that way all the time and recognize that we are always in that kind of relationship with everything else if we choose to be, and if we recognize that we can be. So that's kind of where I am. And right here where I live in the northeast corner of the United States, the fall is just ending. And so that season of changed colors in the trees is is coming to an end, and it has a poignancy and an emotion and a kind of remembering how glorious those bright colors were just a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
But the weather is changing, and so the world is changing. And at the same moment, the emotions are changing. My perceptions of things are changing. So I'm just fascinated by that.
Mm. Well, perhaps we can talk about the shifting emotions a bit later. I'd like to just go back to again what you mentioned about how you are. I think you've just saying you've just engaged on a new loving relationship, and so that's kind of helping to shift your perceptions. Because when we first started talking on these conversations, you were principally started by looking at the fear and denial around death and the theme of death because of your stage in life, and you wanted to kind of approach it face on, and I think with nobility. And of course, every theme we look at affects our perceptions and our emotions. And now, of course, you've gone through death of your prior partner and your husband, and you've been alone for many years, and going through what I understand is you're changing circumstances in life and moving around from California to Vermont. And now that you've engaged in a new relationship with someone, it seems to be that you've noticed suddenly how that affects your perceptions of the world around you and your engagement. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's this. There's a kind of lilt, a lift of the heart, and an opening of the eyes, and an awareness of what it smells like, and the significance of this daily changing of season, which normally, we're too busy to notice. But when the feelings are heightened, what I notice is that I'm aware of everything,
Mm-hmm.
every little thing. and a pussycat comes and walks by my feet and my heart just opens. We become kind of silly, I think, but it's a silliness that I happen to appreciate. And music sounds different. And, poetry can move me to tears. And I love being in that state. And that, I'm an artist, I'm a writer. So being in that state heightens my ability to do what I do best. So it's kind of high living in a way.
Yeah, and the question you're asking is, why can't we be in that state? And we should be. You said like poetry, romantic poets, Keats and these similar poets were writing about trying to engage through the imagination, through the emotions, this kind of almost transcendental reality, and attraction and love is part of that, perhaps pathway to that, which makes us look at the world around us, and there's so much trauma. It's as if we're being almost intentionally, or in some ways intentionally, in some ways a byproduct of our society, where we've been pulled away from that attraction. I just reminded, I was talking to you a few minutes ago, I was just giving a talk before, and I was reciting a research from a media study, and they said that in the media, this study had noticed that the most often used word in our media is the word death. And they'd calculated that by the time a young child reaches the age of 12, they would have witnessed 20,000 murders. But that would be through the media, through films, movies, television, video games. So in one sense, it's not real murder, but it's still desensitization. And not, and still, if you're seeing like, zombie eating people's limbs and everything, there's a kind of externalization of a certain trauma, in a sense. So all that, whether we're not consciously traumatized, it's still taking us away from this, you say, vibration of joy and attraction. And perhaps our cultures are both intentionally and through byproduct taking us away from the possibilities of engaging with that transcendental law of attraction.
Yeah, exactly. And what it generates is fear. And when we're afraid, we're not sensitive to anything positive. So, yes, I would say in some cases it is deliberate. But I'd be curious to know with whom it's deliberate and who propagates it just by habit. That is what gets a rise out of people. I don't know. But I wish we could all just fall in love more. Have that experience of, and people do have it with their pets, which is very sweet to see. But that sense of just deep love and appreciation for small things. And for me, I do experience, when I'm happening to be in love with somebody, which actually happens to me quite frequently. I, take a walk and I see a blossom and I get really excited by it. Whereas normally we walk right past things like that, unless they're more showy. So it's that perception, I'm sort of thinking on my feet here, that perception of the small things, the things that go unnoticed normally, but which are representative of the whole.
Yeah.
And we miss it.
I think that's a key point there, the small things which are representative of the whole. So it's kind of where in that state you're able to notice or recognize or perceive these smaller aspects, whether it's a blossom or some part of nature or something passing our attention. But at the same time, we're able to connect it within a larger context, something larger than itself. And this is, what we can refer to as like the transcendental connection. We are aware of the material things of our lives, but we'll also, there's a sense that they belong to something grander. And when we're in fear or we're depressed or, or a similar kind of emotion, which, you're very likely to get if you watch mainstream television these days, you feel alone and isolated and alienated. There's something about that energy that we're getting from this mainly kind of propaganda or the news of the world that makes us feel sad and alienated and despondent and with ennui apathy. Whereas it's complete reversal from this sense of, as you say, this connection with all these different aspects of the realm around us. It's not just a world, it's a realm of many different layers. So it's as if modern society, whether intentionally or, as I say, as a byproduct, is kind of compartmentalizing humanity. No?
But it's part of our mindset, which is to separate things out from one another. I mean, all of science goes that way, where you take things out of their context in order to look at them very closely. But the mistake is that you forget to put them back again.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we know about are small individual bits of everything. That's how technology works, I guess. And unawareness of the larger picture, which isn't only a thought or seen thing, it's a felt thing. And we are basically taught that the feelings and the intuitions are not important, especially, for a scholar of any sort, that you have to be independent of it rather than connected to it. And that is a mistake so profound, I think, that leaves love and feeling and intuition out,
Mm-hmm.
and then applauds that, saying that you're not supposed to, that's an ignorant point of view. And, we've made a profound mistake in our culture by insisting upon that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, where do you start with it, and how do you change it as an adult in your own life is something that I think about a lot.
And you say, well, how do we change that? Maybe the responsibility is on us to try to change that, because our society and our civilizational context isn't providing the support that we should have. So
That's
we
right.
have to take it upon ourselves. I think what you just described there is like scientific materialism, the empirical order. If you can't prove it, or if you can't repeat it in a laboratory, it doesn't exist,
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course, how can you give evidence or prove the sensation of love? Because you can't, you can't
Mm-hmm.
empirically prove love. It's so, as you said, it kind of gets put aside and say, well, that's a subjective experience, everybody feels it differently, so be it. But it's then kind of pushed to the periphery rather than being at the center of the human experience.
Right. And I remember in school being told that doing it, writing a paper, for example. I remember once in a philosophy class writing a paper on Aristotle. Goodness knows what I knew about Aristotle in those days. But I gave an intuitive feeling, texture to whatever it was that I was writing. I don't remember it at all. But I got a D in that because I did it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember really being hurt by that. Not so much the grade, but the fact that it was judged incorrectly from my point of view. But I was just a student, and the person who gave me the D was the teacher, the professor. So very confusing stuff, especially for sensitive young people, and especially for sensitive young people who are artists of one sort or another, and who really do work through their feeling state. So I think it's the question that's up these days, and I wonder sometimes if it won't be the artists who save us,
Mm-hmm.
especially the young artists, the ones who, the ones who've been homeschooled or have not yet had to take on the society's definition of things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but the old way is gone, is dead as far as I'm concerned, and should not be taught anywhere as a separate thing. It has its place, but it is not the definition of our world.
Yeah. Well, that example you gave about the schooling, well, of course, it's, I think anyone can relate to that. And it shows you that our institutions, the institutions that develop our education and our so-called knowledge institutions, are these structures that are based on all, the kind of externalization, the empirical order, the rationality. I mean, but it's been a part of the human mindset for so long. When you were speaking, I was reminded of a poem by Rumi, or the Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi, who very well known these days. In the 13th century, he had a poem called "The Two Forms of Knowledge." Well, according to the modern translation, two forms of knowledge, and he said one side of knowledge is the knowledge that is conditioned and told to you, and is a kind of you take on board as a social construct. And then the other knowledge, the second type, is your intuition, your inner knowledge, that comes from the inner being. And he said, like, where you place your emphasis, will just kind of, you get what you get what you give, kind of thing.
Mhm.
And so yes, there is different forms of knowledge, but our societies have gone to the external kind of conditioned form of knowledge, unfortunately, which is, I suppose, part of our continuing pathway into deeper and deeper materialism, rather than recognizing the intuitive, you could call them, you say, the mannerisms and laws, such as the attraction through positivity and joy, and these kind of grasping the whole. But we've been shut down, and I think we're seeing the consequences right now of humanity being shut down in this present state of civilization.
I wonder how much of this has had to do with the putting down of the feminine side of humans altogether, but the perception that women and artists and people of other sexual dimensions have had, and we have all, as a woman, we have all suffered from that, and the whole society has, I believe, because we've been so polarized in a direction that is part of it, but not the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So wholeness, I think, is what's on the table now, and learning to do that changes everything. It changes the economic system, it changes the philosophy, it changes the educational system, it changes how we run our families and households. And, we're in that extreme transition now. And I'm very curious to see what happens next.
I think we're all curious. It seems to me like, every time we start to move further through this transition, we get pulled back, like one step forward, two steps back. Because, people are recognizing this need to have this whole thinking, this intuition, this greater appreciation of the feminine qualities and the energies that come with that. And by feminine qualities, it's not a gender issue. It's a sense of also the qualities and energies that come that way. And then all of a sudden we get to a state of the world where we get increased polarization. And what's happening on the world stage now is putting people in camps. You're either over there or over there. And we're seeing this huge, again, a huge kind of outcry across the world where people are choosing their camps. So it's as if we, on one level, we intuitively understand this is the way to go. And then we get some trigger catalyzing event that pulls back people into a lower form of cognition, let's say, the old structures of the old mind of binary and polarity thinking. And, we're trying to break out of our cocoon, so to speak, for the next stage of the evolvement from, the caterpillar to the butterfly. And then some great thing comes along, and then boof, we get pulled back into the old form of the mind, and we get polarized again. It does seem like we're in that kind of loop at the moment.
Yeah, well, it's called war.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what it does is it generates fear. And the fear is totally understandable in that context. And so, however we collectively do it, or there are bad guys who are pushing us around. I don't know. But boy, that's, if you read history, you get that situation over and over and over again.
Mhm.
So, God, it's discouraging. And so who benefits from that? Why do we do that consistently? So of course, I'm looking at the Middle East now and going, oh no, oh no. I mean, this is historic battles. What, the same people battling one another by giving one another different names and different identities. And how did we do this again?
Mhm.
It's very discouraging.
Yeah, it does. I say it seems like it's a very kind of base programming, this form of duality and polarity, and as you said, through fear or other strategies, which I do feel are being manipulated, and also um, I suppose their profiles are being strengthened by certain vested interests, because when we are in this mind of polarity, we're not unified, we're not strengthened as a human collective. So we can be more greatly managed and kept apart. And so the power structures, on one side, the power structures may feel that they can keep their positions of vested interest because humanity is divided. But at the same time, I think every time we're divided, more and more people wake up to the fact that we're being divided. You know, so at some point there's going to be enough awake people to actually, I think bring down these dysfunctional power structures. But it's just keeping us in the loop a bit longer. And then you say it's like the magician's trick. Everybody's looking at the magician pulling out the white rabbit out the hat, but it's not seeing the bigger picture of how the trick's been done. So we're focusing on what we've been told to focus on, and we're missing how, as you said, how these other natural laws operate. We're missing how we're supposed to be part of this collective attraction that can nurture each other rather than feeding off each other.
And as you're talking, I'm seeing a conveyor belt of people being born and dying, and so the we keeps changing.
Mm.
And watching the young ones, these brilliant new people who are on the right side of God, I would say, um, seeing it and using whatever it is that they are very good at as a way of countering an old trend.
Mhm.
And I'm close to the end of my life, and uh, asking myself every day, how do I best teach those who are younger than I am? Or not so much teach, it's more about encouragement.
Mhm.
When I meet one of these remarkable young people, how do I support them? How do I let them know that from my perspective, they are absolutely on the right track and they should not be discouraged, but keep doing it, and then introduce them to one another in any way that I can. And I think that's our job as elders and as people who are right at the peak of your strength. And you're doing it in every way. I mean, I just watch all the ways in which you put out the good word, and you do it brilliantly. And I'm so proud of you and so pleased. And you're not alone. And we're all, we get heartbroken. And I think it occurs to me just now for the first time, that's part of the plan, is to break our hearts. And then we kind of lose our strength.
Mhm.
And for a while, the first week or so after the initial bombing in the Middle East, I had no strength. I was just, blown out and feeble.
Mhm.
And I think that's part of the plan,
Mhm.
actually. So I don't know. I don't know what to say except to, do what we're doing as best we can.
Yeah. No, I'd agree with that. And also going back to this idea of attraction, I think, we can act as a kind of, all people on that wavelength can act as attractors, because there's already enough attractors into the negative, into the alienation, into the polarization. But there's, anyone working in creativity and onto the path of conscious awareness and onto the path of the wholeness can act as attractors onto this pathway. Because when as you say, this conveyor belt of new generations coming into the world, they have a certain initial stage where they're trying to understand the world around them. And I've seen a lot of young people who have been taken down the path that I would not support. And I've seen a lot of young people, going into apathy and alienation and depression. And I see a lot of young people just glued to their phones all the time, and just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And they're not connecting with people around them. They're antisocial in a way. And these are in great numbers. So there need to be enough positive attractors where people can see there's something over there that's happening, and they maybe want to, find other things that they can connect and inspire them and think they're not alone in the way they think. So at all time, we need attractors to pull people away from the negative path, because there is a strong pull to this kind of increasing material techno-tyranny isolation path. So we need to counteract that by having enough, attraction to pull over into the, let's say, the evolving betterment of humanity path. And but as you say, I think each conveyor belt, each generation, there's more and more people who are naturally somehow attuned to the correct evolvement path. But there's still the dangers of the negative attraction in the world right now.
There is, and I think there's a racial component here, which is what I've been observing for many years, which is a lot of the genius is in the communities of color who come from elsewhere, and for whom coming to my country at least has saved their lives. And so they grow up. My husband was one of them, actually. He was a refugee from Germany. And no matter how the politics of America went, he supported this country because it was not where he came from. It saved his life. And I think that sense of opportunity is actually more amongst the people who have been saved by it than those who got born into it and who take it for granted and have been basically spoiled. Or, you can argue with that. I think I'm one of the spoiled ones anyhow. But there are all these circumstances out there that have brought each of us to where we are right now, and our mindset. I'm just remembering spending time teaching in China. And it was right after the Cultural Revolution, and my husband was invited to teach, to sort of educate those people who had survived the Cultural Revolution, because many of them had not been able to go to school. So it was a catch-up kind of education. And I was an innocent in those days. I didn't know about the Cultural Revolution or anything. But I got there, and then I learned. Oh my goodness, did I learn. And by the time we left China and got back to San Francisco airport, I literally went down on my knees and kissed the floor. And it was funny in a way to remember it, but that was a sincere gesture. Like, thank God I am in this place rather than that place. So there we are.
Although we can perhaps say it's a vastly different situation now, all these years to where we are, because it seems like, there are a lot of tyrannical structures in many Western states now who have done us a disservice. So it's even a greater necessity to break out of this apathy of cultural apathy or cultural conditioning or cultural passivity or laziness. But I say, every crisis is an opportunity, and that's a well-known, again, the well-known Chinese proverb, every crisis is an opportunity. In that perhaps these disruptions are going to break down these solid, lazy, or indentured kind of states, whereby now we've been the glass of sediment is being mixed up and it's all moving around. So I think that perhaps this is a time of actually allowing now to break away from our moorings and realign our resonances, our attractions, because perhaps it's more difficult to break away when society is stable or seemingly stable.
Yeah.
Because you get more set in your ways, or your lifestyle is more sedentary or in a routine. And so I think perhaps we can take a positive light from these times, whereby we're allowing to uproot ourselves, not only physically but mentally, emotionally, psychologically. And these uprootings is a time to redefine how we wish to be in ourselves and in our communities.
Right, and we're being shaken up, because things are going so much faster, and there's the next attraction and then the next attraction. And I think it's having the effect of just making a mess, and that mess may be an essential piece of it. That the ground is not stable anymore, and in fact is not stable physically and literally, because there are volcanoes and earthquakes and tsunamis and all of those things that let us know that what we call solid ground isn't, and that we cannot count on it. And it's the perfect metaphor for society, which is nothing is solid. Nothing can be taken for granted. And nothing, even though it looks like tomorrow will be the same as today, it's simply not true. So how do we live in a way that knows how to balance, and knows how to dance, essentially, knows how to recalibrate and find our footing, all of those ways of saying that we're not living on solid ground.
Yeah, exactly. You need to have some breakages in order to have that dance. Or as we say sometimes in England, you've got to crack some eggs to dance with the chickens.
I never heard that. I thought you were going to say to make an omelet.
Oh yeah, that's a well-known phrase. This is a
old one,
slightly less well-known phrase over here.
That's great.
Yeah.
To crack some eggs to dance with the chickens. Great.
Yeah.
Great.
But at the same time, like you said, life really always has been about movement. It's just that sometimes, especially in the so-called modern West, we got pulled into a very kind of routine rut in many ways, and then we thought that uncertainty and flexibility was anti-life. We didn't want uncertainty. We didn't want movement. But in fact, all life is in movement. Everything's in motion. All our atoms is in motion. Nothing is static. And going back to the law of attraction, well, if there was no attraction, the universe just wouldn't be, because all the things that make the material universe at the base level is atoms in attraction, protons and neutrons and electrons, all in attraction of some form. And of course, on top of that, then we have the energetic attraction beyond the material particles. So everything is in movement and attraction. Right. And we have to probably find what attracts us in the correct manner. So we need a discernment of attraction, perhaps.
Right. Well, it's emotional attraction. You mustn't leave out.
Mhm.
And that, that's love. And ultimately, that's really what we're all, knowing it or not, are aiming for. And it's what we all want, even though we may not use that language. But that connection is what makes life.
Mhm.
And without it, we're sterile. So, I wonder, I look at technology, which is so fascinating to so many people, and not to me because I can't figure it out. But it's the opposite, as far as I can see. That organic, animal, natural way of meeting, of noticing that flower by the side of the road, noticing the other person getting onto the subway with you. Um, that's really what it's all about. That's what excites us,
Mhm.
most of us, I think. Um, but what we tend to do is go from the head, from the mind, which kind of clicks away like a computer
Mhm.
without the heart involved. And so I just wonder how we're going to do this, how we're going to learn how to love. I think we're all born knowing how, but then it kind of gets slapped out of us a bit.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I've always thought, let me ask you, as a British man, uh, whether or not you lived at home when you were studying in school, or whether you were sent away to a boarding school.
Well, I wasn't sent away to a boarding school, but it's an English tradition is that at the age of 18, when you go to university, you always go to a university away from home.
Uh-huh.
Uh, yeah,
Well,
because it's supposed to be your first. Going to university is not one part of it is studying, but of course, if you're really intent on studying, you have to go for further study. The first 3 years of university is light study, but in England, it's known as your first kind of inauguration to living on your own.
mhm,
So it would be very strange in England if someone went to university in their hometown while they're living at home.
mhm,
And if that was so, it would most likely be for economic reasons. Um, but when I went to university, there was a state support. So everyone went to university and this is when I learned to cook when I'm moving out of home, learned to look after myself and pay the bills, etc. Um, and that's what it's for. And so, in fact, actually, I did leave home at 18. And after university, I came back only for about 3 or 4 months while I found a job to go to, and then I moved out. So
mhm,
basically, after leaving home at 18, I never came back.
mhm. So
And that,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just to say, and that's why now, when people ask me why are you back in England living close to your parents in the same village, it's because I haven't lived with them for over 30 years because of I moved away at 18, so now I'm coming back to live close to them and be near them, because it is a trait that you do move out. Yeah.
I guess I was thinking about younger ones, the boys who were sent away at the age of 7. I don't know about the
Well,
girls, but the sense,
boarding school here only exists privately if you pay for it. It's for rich parents. And rich parents often do send their kids to school so they can get them out of the way.
I wondered what that was all about, because
Mhm.
that seems an awfully tender age to send a child away from home.
Yeah. No, that
And
boarding schools only exist as private institutions, and they're very generally quite expensive because you pay for board and basically you're paying for custodianship to look after your children.
yeah, I've always wanted to ask somebody about that.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, but no, yeah. So, but but as you're speaking about, again, going back to I like how when you talk about attraction, you call it love. It's the same thing. You know, I think that the gel of the universe, the cosmos, is love. That's what attraction is. It's
Mhm.
just that, of course, as humans, we tend to think of love more in a kind of sensual, physical, or superficial thing. I'm in love with you, I'm in love with you, and then you fall out of love. I'm in love with you. You know how the world is. But of course, love in a profound sense is the gel that keeps everything spinning together. It's beyond the sensual. It's what draws you to everything in existence.
Right. And without that draw, nothing would exist. In fact, and you couldn't have matter.
No,
It's
you couldn't have
broken.
anything
Have,
sticking together.
well, that notion, that's a very important notion, I think, that love is what holds the world together. And we don't recognize that collectively, and it's not taught in the schools. And even, by many religious traditions, it's considered sinful. The human aspect of loving and connecting through that romantic feeling. And so I'm wondering about that. And we have to change that. It's gotten us into huge trouble.
I mean, you could say that that the precepts given by Jesus Christ was based on this notion of love, because what he was saying in the Gospels and the parables in the New Testament completely different from the warmongering in the Old Testament, in a sense. But in the New Testament, Jesus Christ was talking a lot about love. Love your neighbors yourself, and he wasn't talking about sensual physical love. He was talking about this energy of love that we need to bring into the human spirit, the spirit of human love and connection and that. And so almost seemed, you could say, and I don't have any religious position, and I've never had any religious allegiance, but it seems that an impulse of the love energy was brought in through Jesus Christ to try to get us away from our infighting, perhaps.
Yeah. I'm remembering a conversation that I had with two of my grandchildren who were very wise. They still are. But when they were very young, they were still connected to an old wisdom. It was a fascinating thing to witness. But one was 7, one was 5, and we were discussing the nature of the universe, of all things. And they got it right. And the 5-year-old in this conversation said, well, isn't that the love glue of the universe? This little 5-year-old fishki. I looked at her, who are you? But she knew, that was intrinsic. And I suspect it's intrinsic in pretty much everyone.
Yeah.
And then, it gets buried.
It gets buried, and we get substituted by a false kind of a false, sickly, sentimentalized and superficial social cultural love image. And we see in the movies all the time these rom-com films, this, as they call them, romantic
I've
comedies.
never heard that. What is a rom-com film?
Well, I mean, it's an American term, so it came out of Hollywood. Rom-com is short for romantic comedies.
I've never heard that.
Yeah, rom-com. That's it. That's how they define it. You see, they've even abbreviated the idea of love in a film to a rom-com. Sounds like you're chewing on something. Rom-com. So the idea of these comedies of people falling in out of love and having sexual relationships, and and you broke my heart over summertime, and all this stuff is just, it kind of like, just we get to the basis level possible of what the attraction,
Right.
the energy of attraction could be. And so again, it dilutes in our cultures this notion that we are attracted to each other beyond the social persona.
Right. Or that you can love and it be not a romantic relationship. That the word love does not stop with romance. I don't know, saying something I don't even know what I'm talking about, but go ahead.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I mean, yes, it's true. It's you know, we I think we do innately sense this, but we've just been distracted from it, and we've perhaps been given a different vocabulary, a false vocabulary, and therefore, we know what love is, but we talk about it when we say it, we automatically think about it in this way. So it's like the word has been given different associations from what we innately understand by it.
Right. And it's sort of what we were talking about earlier. You have this one small word, and then it covers an awful lot of territory, but it's not used as broadly as its potential meanings are.
Mm-hmm.
So you just kind of cheapen it and then ignore it. And so politically, it doesn't exist. Educationally, it doesn't tend to exist. Business-wise, it doesn't tend to exist.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just sort of off on the side somewhere. And that is very worrisome. It's gotten mixed up with romanticism, and that's not it. Much more than
It's been hijacked by the rom-com industry.
I checked that I had never even heard of. That's how non-central I am.
Yeah. But I mean, but it's not only, I mean, love is the whole encompassing, but of course, it's just this sense of the law of attraction is because we all come from the same origin in some way. We are living a life experience as a particular aspect, but of course, our origin in a spiritual state is, and even as a human being, is that we are part of one family, one. We are connected, we are united. But and so if you can perceive from that level, then you go way beyond these kind of polarizing structures. Could we really have war and killing and murder if we had that fundamental understanding of our innate unified connectedness? It's hard to say because, as you said at the beginning, our emotions have been shifted from this. So we don't, it's very rare for a human being to emotionally connect with our innate, unified kind of origin altogether. Our emotions tend to be more externalized, would you say?
Yes, I would. And I think what gets left out is the natural world itself, is all of life. And what I think we tend to do is narrow it down to human romanticism, which is nothing really in the backdrop of life itself and this remarkable natural world that we not only live in but we're part of. And it doesn't get taught in our schools. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't get taken into consideration in our economy. It's so basic and it's ignored. And that really frightens me. And it's brought us to this place of now or never. We either make it through this by change or we go down because that's the way the pattern goes. You cannot ignore that which supports life, mm-hmm. thinking that somehow you're outside that.
Yeah. And you certainly can't have those values when all social cultural life is valued according to economic value. And that's how we exist. In the state of our so-called modern world, social and cultural values are economically driven. And that's how they are, kind of through the lens of economies. Like, is this going to be worth it? Is this profitable? And again, that I think that kind of materialistic, scientific materialism, economic driven narrative has really fed into this technological drive, which you mentioned earlier on, how technology doesn't align with the love impulse. It's kind of splitting us up and dividing us. And just because that's the way machinic, non-organic aspects operate. The organic aspect operates through wholeness. Technology operates through, I suppose, almost a kind of binary. It is zeros and ones. It's a binary language. I'm reminded of that, of the very well known, or rather, I should say, infamous historian Yuval Noah Harari, and he's spoken about. He's popular. He's always talking. He's probably the most popular historian in our current age. But what he's saying is worrying. What he says is that in the future, the biggest issue that humans will face is being irrelevant. Humans won't have meaning in the future. Technology will overtake humans and have meaning for us, and we'll just become like apathetic people looking, not having a place in the world, because technology will overtake us. And that is the inorganic, non-love path. I don't think it's ever going to happen, but I think they're pushing it. But you can see the difference. That path of useless, he actually said there will be an underclass of irrelevant and useless humans in the future. But if you had love in your heart, how can you call any human useless?
Well, I think they won't be useless, but they will be destroyers. We, not they. But I don't think it can happen. I think we'll basically do away with ourselves before then, or leave a remnant who will start over. I don't know. I have to believe that there's a germ, and there are individuals who have clear vision, and they're not going to let that happen in their own lives. And I watch out for them, and I fall in love with them right, left, and center, and then play.
Mm-hmm.
You have to learn how to play. We're not very good at it.
No, we're not. We should be. Was it homo ludens? I think there was a Danish archaeologist who did a study on playful humans called homo ludens. Ludens is, I think, Latin for play or something. Yeah, we're much more fun when we're playing, aren't we? We're much more dour and sour when we're when we're raising our fists and criticizing people and that. So yeah, we've lost the fun and the joy of play, and I think we've kind of just, there's been certain factors or controlling factors in our societies which have, changed the landscape so much that we're almost living in an alien landscape. It's not our natural terrain. Our natural terrain is connectivity, compassion, and play and love.
And nature, the natural world, which has been done away with as much as the powers that be had the opportunity to do so.
Yeah.
Which is, it's crazy. It's so antithetical to real human impulse. So yeah, we've gotten very lost. And maybe the pattern is that when you get lost, you have to get really lost, so that you lose one another, and then you have a small remnant who bring it back again over time. But that is not going to take place in a single lifetime. So,
well,
this is a very hard topic, and I'm very glad and sort of proud of us that we're just jumping right into it.
Yeah.
Because I think we have to not avoid it. Really see the worst thing that can happen.
Yeah, we can't avoid it, but as you say, we have to maybe get very lost. And when you said that word, it just reminded me of perhaps the only hymn that I really align with or I enjoy, hymn, is that Amazing Grace. Amazing Grace, which says, I was lost and then I was found, I was blind and now I see. Is that until we can come to grace, we have to come from this lack to find grace, to have grace, to be blind so we can see, to be lost so we can be found. And I think, and I always have faith that in the human condition, and I have faith in the kind of the sense of grace or spiritual grace or blessing as well that will come and help us out, or we'll be attracted to it if we're in the right alignment.
And that song was written, I think, by a previous slave owner who saw the light at some point. I don't know the particular story behind it, but he recognized that everything that he had done was absolutely in the wrong direction and changed. I don't remember his name, but I think that's where that song comes from. Slave trade.
Mm.
Which is like, where did we ever dream that one?
Yeah.
Goodness.
It's like someone's been implanting nightmares from outside into us, injecting nightmares into us. But yeah, it is. But as you say, if there's always a counterbalance. So if there are freaky, crazy, nightmarish things going on in the world, there's also the presence of grace and blessing and love. And I do feel that those are present if we can kind of find the right attraction to them to bring them into our lives. So perhaps we can. It's a good note to kind of round up on, to say that we are, we are blessed with grace in the human condition. Just let us not get distracted away from that understanding.
And just one other thing to say, which is, and to remember that we are the carriers of it. We can bring it. We don't have to wait for it.
Mm-hmm.
We can bring it right now. And in a way, that's what our conversations are for and are about. Is we are trying to be it. So I thank you again.
Yeah. Well, thank you also, Carolyn, to recognize that end point, that we are the receivers, the carriers, and the transmitters, and that is part of the glorious aspect of being in the human condition. So,
Okay.
So may you.
I wouldn't miss it for the world.
I don't think you are missing it. I think you're jumping in at all time, just like now in your new loving relationship. You just don't miss out on it, do you? So may you have many more wonderful times ahead. So thanks for the conversation, Carolyn.
Yeah, and thank you also for the conversation, and for you. You're wonderful. So I only know you on a screen, but that's better than not knowing you at all.
It's a good enough connection for now, if we can't have the physical.
Right.
Okay.
Well, my friend, be well.